Hi, you. This is me, and I want to make a video about ethics. And ethics as it applies to secular society, kind of post-religious society, in that Nietzschean sense of God's untimely death and a loss, or at least a perceived loss, of a moral anchoring where all our value systems can live. There are many suggestions that are making the rounds. Notably among them is well-being, which on the one hand I think is a fairly good place to start. But as something that is, pertains to objective reality, I think it's been quite roundly debunked. I'm not going to go into any criticism of other people's suggestions. Instead, I'm just going to make my own suggestion and maybe add something to the debate. And in doing so, I want to talk about consent as a moral anchoring, that our values can reside around and actually be objectively true. And there are a couple of reasons why I arrive at, and well, subsequently unable to debunk, but maybe you can in the comments section. And the first reason to talk about, I think, is basically the statement, what should we do? And with particular focus on the last two words, we do. We are doing something. I think that, if you try to look at all value systems across the world, to try to do a compare and contrast type of thing, I don't think you actually get very far. Because if you're trying to discover universally held values, I think you are just as likely, if not more likely, to actually falsely identify things that can't really be discoverable as ethical, but are these moralizing values that we have, that have been handed down to us, first by authority and through coercion, and then from generation to generation. And I think that despotic minds think alike. And so many of the values that we all hold throughout the planet, I think can be something that we hold in common at the same time as being ethically wrong. So, since I believe it's impractical to be sifting through all of these value systems and discover much of anything, I think it's just as well to just throw them out completely and just begin from scratch. And if we do begin from scratch, an ethic pretty much just boils down to a do. And a specific do. It's the do that we do. Inherent to action, which we are apparently to engage in as a community, is the voluntary nature of action. Now, if you want to, kind of discuss free will or a deterministic universe, and what really constitutes a difference between a cramp and an idea? we can have that discussion later. But as far as we understand ourselves, action is voluntary, and as such implies consent. So if you are doing, you are consenting. Now, this totally gets messy, even still. If somebody is holding a gun to your head and you're doing it, that obviously gets a little bit messy. But then again, what I would argue is that the person being threatened isn't actually engaged in the act itself as much as being engaged in trying to stay alive. But morality is obviously about universally held values, all right? But I don't think that it's possible to discover a moral society and discover a common value system without beginning with the individual consents, the consents of everybody in society. I think it is through the presentation of those consents that we can begin to discover a common consent that hopefully the vast majority of us can subscribe to, enabling us to perhaps live one day in a free and harmonic society. This common consent, though, cannot petrify. A value system cannot remain stationary. The only way to uphold that validity of common consent is by having that ongoing ethical conversation, focusing on the individual and the group. An ethical debate that is constant, that is alive, honest, on point, and most of all, consequential. That we keep rediscovering the consents that are given to us through the people that we surround ourselves with. Now, the ethical discussion is often complex. It's often, a meta discussion, a discussion about the discussion. How does morality lead to more morality? And yet, at other times, it's very straightforward and banal. In the situation of a rape, we certainly aren't doing. It's only one person that is actually doing, and the other one isn't especially. And so perhaps it's possible to identify that as something that, because it isn't being done by us, is actually, in fact, also immoral. Lying also, especially in the sense or the cases where lies aren't small white lies, but lies, in fact, intended for undermining a person's consent, undermining their ability to give consent, or as Noam Chomsky talks about, the manufacture of consent, which is a vast societal problem. I believe that, through adding to this conversation, I am, as the others, trying to contribute to something that is very important. And that is the development of culture, especially in the sense that technology, which is enabling us to cause mass death and suffering on an industrial scale, comes into conflict with our temperament, to the point where our temperament and the tools that we have devised are incompatible with continued human existence on the planet. Technological advancing is outpacing cultural development by so much these days that it seems every time there is some new development, people are lying awake at night, pondering the consequences. And most of all, atomic weapons that are in the hands of authorities that essentially, by behavior, are quite juvenile, without too much thinking about long-term consequences. Like, for instance, our ability to change the climate and our inability to do anything about it. And that's sort of it. I don't want to be rambling on and on about this in this particular video. It makes the video more accessible, to keep it short and sweet. And for you all who take notice of this, if you want more from me, I can instead just create a follow-up video where I go into more details about this. But until then, I'm kind of done. So yeah, bye.